Welcome to the 3x5 news, reviews, and reviews scribbled on index cards. We get in and get out fast, so keep up. Actually, today I'm going to kind of take my time because I'm talking about an issue that's very personal to me, elections. Without the right to vote and without elections, we don't stand a chance. I almost said democracy doesn't stand a chance. But apparently that word has become taboo because on bad days, Americans think of it as a system that's failing them, or on good days, as something that Democrats and liberals are trying to destroy. Not Republicans, mind you, who are actually, transparently doing so. I submit that beyond all the massive wreckage that the Trump administration is inflicting on America, rolling back voting rights and stripping away election security constitute the number one threat. Without them, we have nothing, no legal means aside from the inconsistent courts to defend ourselves against him with, since law enforcement and the military now belong to Trump. Before I continue, I know this is kind of a desperate look, but I have no shame. Kind of like Republicans, right? Well, here goes. Anybody who leaves a comment on my video will not only receive a comment back, but whether you are a thoughtful person or a troll, I will subscribe to your channel. While I think subscribing to YouTube channels is a personal decision, whether you like what I have to say or really hate it, please consider subscribing to mine. Thank you. Thus, it was alarming when Trump recently removed General Timothy Haugh, spelled H-A-U-G-H, from his position as the head of the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command. Among all the terrible firings, what makes this stand out? Well, it was an attempt to weaken the country's cyber defenses, just as we are dealing with the most dangerous threats ever to the infrastructure of individuals, corporations, and institutions such as banks, as well as applications and clouds. American businesses, banking, energy, etc. could be tripled. In fact, according to the Times, along with firing General Haugh, quote, the Trump administration swept away nearly all of the government's election-related cyber defenses. Election-related, close quote. National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, the Signalgate guy, said, quote, we've been playing a lot of defense, and we keep trying to play better and better defense, unquote, he said. In other words, he is more concerned with going on the offensive and mounting cyber attacks on other nations, which is already being done anyway. Apparently, Signal Mike knows nothing about war, not to mention football and other sports, where offense and defense are complementary, and you can't have one without the other. Wait, how does exposing the U.S. to attacks like that benefit Trump? Returning to General Haugh, much of his focus was on Russia, beginning with Moscow's interference in the 2016 election. I know some question it, but the evidence suggests, whether or not it actually affected the outcome of the election, that Russia was trying to help Trump win because of his perceived pliability. 2 points. One, Trump did not like the implication that he did not win the 2000 election fair and square. 2, he actually invited Russian interference and wants to keep that open to help elect Republicans in future elections, including possibly himself in 2028. Remember when he said, quote, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing, unquote, from Hillary Clinton's private server. Previous to General Haugh being fired, Elon Musk's Doge fired 130 employees of a division of Homeland Security called CISA, C-I-S-A, tasked with protecting us from cyber interference by the likes of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and, believe it or not, established by Trump himself in his first terms. Furthermore, one of CISA's jobs had been providing state election officials with computer equipment to protect their election systems from hacking. Besides resenting CISA for announcing that the 2020 election was clean and thus undermining his claims that the election had been stolen, this also added to suspicions Trump was trying to keep the pathways to future foreign interference open. As Arizona's Democratic Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes, said, quote, it's like somebody lowered the drawbridge and there's no guards, end quote. It's certainly difficult for American citizens, well, me anyway, to wrap our heads around. We would be remiss if we didn't mention that General Hawke's firing was at the behest of Lara Loomer. If you don't know who she is, you are lucky. She is the far-right conspiracist who Trump's people tried to keep away from him. But somehow last week she slipped through the cracks like cyberattacks will now, and convinced Trump to fire General Hawke and other officials deemed insufficiently MAGA. And before that, even though the president does not have congressional authorization to do so, Trump fired the chairman of the Federal Election Commission. He followed that up by signing an executive order. Ever see Trump's signature and watch him doing it? Not only does he take great pleasure in it, I think that aside from hitting a golf ball, it's the only time that he truly concentrates. Anyway, the executive order gave him power over heretofore independent agencies such as said Federal Elections Commission, thus allowing him to twist campaign rules to his advantage. Trump also seeks to strip the status of the U.S. Postal Service as an independent agency and bring it into the Department of Commerce, over which a president has power. Control of the Postal Service could help enable Trump to cancel or create obstacles to voting by email. Hang on, the worst is yet to come. Republicans in Congress are trying to get a bill passed called the SAVE Act, an acronym for Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. Instead of SAVE, it should be called Shrink, because that's what it would actually do to voter eligibility. Or more honestly yet, it should be called the Lose Act, as in lose your voting rights. Ostensibly, SAVE is a means to prevent non-citizens from voting in federal elections. In reality, as anyone with an ounce of sense knows, undocumented immigrants don't dare set foot in polling places out of fear of being apprehended and deported. To begin with, SAVE would require proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. That doesn't sound so bad, you say? But one such proof is a birth certificate that matches one's current name. One's current name. Are they talking about married women? Unbelievable as it sounds, in order to register to vote, married women who have taken their husband's last name could not use their birth certificate to register to vote. Never mind the difficulty many of us, like me, would experience locating the damn thing. Is it in my files, on the top shelf of my closet, in my storage unit? The other means of identification is a passport, which half of Americans, also such as me, don't possess. Because proofs of citizenship must be presented in person when registering, this means large-scale voter registration drives, such as by the League of Women Voters, could no longer be conducted. Now, for the cherry on top, want to show your love for your country, state, or town by volunteering as an election official? Think again. If you registered someone without the required proof of citizenship, even accidentally, and a private citizen, presumably another voter or, quote, poll watcher, happen to observe that interaction, that citizen could sue you. You can count on them being financially supported by a Republican anti-voting rights organization with deep pockets. Wait, did I say that was the worst? There's still that time-honored, disgraced, autocratic tradition. Overstaying your welcome. Trump is talking about running for a third term, illegal according to the 22nd Amendment of the Constitution. He has already said he is, quote, not joking about the possibility and that, quote, there are methods to get around the constitutional limit. Peter Baker writes in the Times, open quote, at the most extreme are fears that Mr. Trump would simply refuse to leave office, a scenario not dispelled by his replacement of the senior uniform military leadership, end quote. Get that? As I said, he seeks to own the military, and absent the likes of his perceived nemesis of his first term, such as General Mark Milley, he just might. To recap, for the next presidential election, what Trump seems to be doing is to usher the Russians et al. Into our voting systems. Even if foreign interference fails to get him or his successor elected, if uncovered, It could delegitimize the election, and Trump will call it a state of emergency or something, cancel the election, and remain in power. To them, that would be the unforeseeable future in which they would remain in power. Whether or not the Russians win the election for him or ruin it and he remains in office, it's a win-win for him. Finally, in an interview, Representative Dan Goldman, New York Democrat of New York and lead counsel during Mr. Trump's first impeachment, said about voting rights and election security, open quote, "A lot of people are not talking about it because it's not the most pressing issue of that particular day," end quote. That was the day the markets were descending precipitously after Trump announced his worldwide tariffs. But such an attack, he continued, open quote, is actually in motion, and people need to recognize that it is not hypothetical or speculative anymore, end quote. Voting rights, election security, and adherence to the 22nd term limiting amendment are not the issues of our day. They compose the issue of our lifetimes. Again, without them, lacking law enforcement to enforce any court decisions and lacking an army to defend us, American citizens are rendered subservient and defenseless without the ability to vote. And yes, though the word may be out of favor, I will just say it. It's what will allow us to remain a democracy. I don't care whether people want to hear the word or not. Democracy, 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 democracy.